I'm Marshall Shannon with Ministry Design Concepts. Welcome to our webinar on vision discovery. Today we're going to be talking about the process of how do you go about discovering God's vision for your ministry. Often I believe it's been looked at as just whatever you could create out of your imagination or your own concoction, but really biblically when we look at it, it is mankind connecting with God to discover His will and His vision for a life or a ministry. As we look at this, we're going to be talking about the 4 stages of the ministry design process, and today we're going to be focusing on the discovery phase, which deals with values, mission, and then vision. So as we go through this, let me make certain that you understand, and I repeat this for each one of our ministry design process webinars. Core values are the foundation for your building. Missions is your walls. Vision is your roof. And strategic planning is the finishing out of your building. Everything is built on the foundation of understanding and identifying your core values and then developing and defining your mission based on your core values. And your vision follows suit. These things are not separate issues. They are all tied together, An overview of where we've been and where we're going is that we have talked about the definition of vision, the description of vision, the distinctions of vision, the derivatives of vision, and the directors of vision. Today we're going to deal with the discovery of God's vision for your ministry. This probably is one of the most difficult aspects of the ministry design process to define. If you've listened to the one dealing with visioneering directors, we talked about people being one of 2 types, either sensing, where they perceive information in the world around them solely through their 5 senses of touch and taste and hearing and seeing and so forth. Those 5 senses. Then there's the intuitive person who not only uses his 5 senses but has a 6th sense where he is perceiving it with something that is not physically there, mechanically there in your body. Well, as we go through this, because 75% of the people in our country have, as they're tested out, it is believed that 75% of them are sensing in the way that they're put together, not intuitive. What that translates to in pastoring a church, if you are a pastor, as you listen to me, of your church, and you are predominantly a sensing type person, discovering God's vision for you is more of a challenge. So 75% of our pastors, or some number, are going to have this struggle to be able to figure this out. And so as we go through this, I've chosen to use in this particular explanation of how to discover God's vision for your ministry to talk about the idea biologically of comparing it to the birth of a child. So as we go through this, there are 3 stages in the birthing process. There is conception, and there is 2 crucial phases that are put together here. And by the way, this is not original with me. I have borrowed information from Aubrey Malphurs and Andy Stanley and Gary McIntosh and a number of other pastors, consultants, theologians, in order to try and understand how does a pastor lead a church through the vision discovery phase, and how does he understand what God is thinking? And so we'll use this one this time, and perhaps another approach, another metaphor, another approach explanation next time. There are 2 crucial phases in the conception of an idea that grows as the embryo is birth that is created, that it would grow into a full vision. the end result is you're going to birth the vision out of these stages. So conception. The first one is initiation. As pastors look at your ministry, and they should see, as they look at your community and your ministry, what about any untapped opportunities? Untapped opportunities. There's something that you could be doing that somebody is not tapping into. My wife and I perform ministry audits for churches, and as we go and are there during the week and then in the weekend, and we see their ministry firsthand, we talk with their people, we learn about their community, invariably, I'm looking at it as a coach, and I'm seeing all these untapped opportunities where people could grasp. Matter of fact, I do a SWOT analysis, SWOT, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Well, I get to the opportunity, and I'm looking at all the different kinds of people they could be connecting with through their church family, and I'm thinking, are you guys focusing on this particular area where you could reach these people? And that's how often you come up with the seed thought, the idea that this is what God is thinking. This is his vision. And it is the birthing or the conception, the conceiving of an idea that grows into a vision, that you birth the vision. So you're going from a seed and an egg, bringing those two together to birth an embryo, an idea. Then you're going to develop that idea until it's come to a certain stage where it's ready to be birthed, to be born. And a vision comes out of it. That's how I'm explaining it this time. So you've got untapped opportunities. The second thing that you look at when you initiate this idea, that one of the ways that you conceive of an idea that grows into a vision is dissatisfaction with the status quo. Let me give you, I talked in the Visioneering Director 1 webinar about using the Myers-Briggs type indicator. It's been used for decades. The second one that you can use to do this same type thing, but that puts it into a different setup, is a DISC profile, a personality DISC profile, to determine your personality type. Well, they end up breaking the personality types down into several, 4 types. And in the 4 types, you're going to find them referring to these types in 4 ways. And in the 4 ways, it is D, which stands for dominance, DISC, D-I-S-C. D stands for dominance, I for influence, S for steadiness, and C for compliance. D for dominance, I for influence, S for steadiness, and C for compliance. You say, well, why does this make a difference? Because as scientists and doctors and consultants have followed this and studied the way God puts people together in the womb and how they're nurtured from their nature, how they come out is you find the D and the I, the dominance and the influence type people, are dissatisfied with the status quo. The C and S usually are not. Now, there's no rule or guarantee that it'll be that way every time, but it will do you good. If you just Google personality DISC profile, you will come up with multiple companies that you could consider using for $20, I think is what I've paid. And go through and take the 30-minute, whatever it takes. It takes less than an hour, I think, to take the test. And it will come up and explain for you and tell you what you are and how you're put together. So that they'll tell you if you're this percentage of you, predominantly you're an I. And at 50% of who you are is D. And then 25 and 18% is a C and an S, or it could be completely different, with S being the predominant one and you're really low on the D. People are put together. Let me encourage you to do this. Go research it. Matter of fact, I'll do a webinar later on it and get someone here, to either myself or one of my friends, to talk about it, so you can see how they work together and what their strengths are. A friend of mine, Scott Kokenauer, put together a chart and gave it to me some years ago that compared them in all these different areas. Very, very helpful. I'll have to get his permission or get him to come in and do a webinar for you. But it's very important that you understand personality types and how they blend together, how they perform, how they think, how they perceive. And when it comes to birthing and conceiving of a vision, the D and an I tend to be able to do it easier, and the C and an S struggle. So visionaries see the unmet needs, the shortcomings and deficiencies in the church systems, the programming, the personnel, the facilities, and they see a way to fix them. They see the way to fix them. And so here is, when you look at the first stage of conception, there's initiation that comes about to conceive it. Then there's expansion. And expansion looks at several things. Visionaries are not the squeaky wheels that complain about everything at church or certain things at church, but have no solution. A visionary sees the problem, and he sees an opportunity. And when he sees a problem, he sees a solution. And so the source of a visionary's vision is ultimately God. But catch what I'm about to say here. When you look at Moses in the burning bush in Exodus 3, you see God speaking directly to Moses. Secondly, when you read Nehemiah 2:12, God put into Nehemiah's mind, into his head, into his thinking about rebuilding the walls. That's what I'm saying is the direct method is where God is going and you're talking directly to him and he's talking directly to you, and you know that this is what God wants. You're convinced in your own mind because you've had communication with him. That way may be rare from what we can tell looking at it, but there is the indirect way, which is probably the more common way. And that is the idea did not develop in the leader's mind. It did not originate there. It may have originated in someone else's mind, their idea, their dream, but the leader, the senior pastor, you and I, we didn't think of it first. Someone else bled that over to us or discussed it with us, and we take and develop it. And so there is, in conceiving, there's expansion of it, where indirectly you've listened and watched to retrieve from your experience and someone else's experience. You're reading, you're listening, and the solution to a problem intuitively develops in your mind. Visionary leaders take all the resources around them in people, in programs, in places, in other resources like podcasts and books, and you're reading and then synthesizing all of that information. And so you're coming up with an idea. And it's almost like it pops out of your head, but what it's been doing, that aroma and the product of it has been stewing and simmering for some time in your soul, in your mind. And God is working and stirring it, and others are stirring it and adding to it, and suddenly an idea pops out of this, and now you've got a fertilized egg. From this process, an embryo, an idea, seems to appear from nowhere and begin to grow. And as God talks about in one part of Scripture, the way of a man with a maiden is a mystery. And so as we look at this, this is one way to explain it, that you're merging together a fertile mind with an idea, a seed thought, and you're putting those together to create an idea. And so I wrote this down. So let me just say this to you. Don't think of this as an immaculate conception. In other words, where you can't really explain it because all of a sudden it happened, but you didn't have anything to do with it. You hadn't been intentional or focused or praying or any of that. I believe that we have to pursue the idea and ask God to plant a seed that will develop into His vision for our ministry and our mind and heart. And so our mind and heart must be ready to receive what God has. We've got to be receptive and fertile to receive God's vision for our life and ministry. You can't be sterile. You've got to ask God to make you receptive and fertile to what He is wanting. So this is a spiritual journey where, yes, there are mechanical steps, but you're listening and aware of God. You remember when Samuel in Scripture, God came to him and spoke to him 3 times, and he kept thinking it was Eli? And finally he realized it was God speaking to him? Now, a question for you. How many times do you reckon God is speaking to you and me, and we're not hearing Him? We're thinking it's somebody else, and God is there talking to us? The end result of these 2 phases is a dream that eventually leads to a vision. So let me just go through some things for you to maybe help as we discuss this. Here are some synonyms for 2 words, conceive and conception. They're very much alike, but let's talk about them. The first one is to conceive. If you look it up in a thesaurus, it means to form a concept or an image of. So it is the idea of considering an idea, considering something, a concept, to formulate it. So you consider it, now you're formulating it. You're organizing the thought. You're speculating on the value of it, the worth of it, and the workability of it. You're imagining it. You're imagining it. You're dreaming about it. Your thoughts are pondering it. You wake up in the morning and it's on your mind. You have a moment from the busyness of life and your mind goes back to this thing that God's been dealing with you and it's kind of sticking on you. You think about it. You meditate on it. The second way, this synonym, it means to become pregnant. It means to be impregnated, to get in the family way. And so you have an idea, the seed thought, that comes to a fertile mind, an egg, and it's able to penetrate it and join together. And from that, your seed thought is going to develop and eventually be birthed into a vision, or it's going to be aborted. It'll be vetted. It'll be cast aside. And so as you think through this way, I want you to meditate on it, think on it, discuss it with your friends. You can call me and discuss it with me, but just to talk about, all right, how is God going to give us vision? Because guys, probably at the forefront of plateaued and declining churches, failure in ministry, is the lack of understanding God's vision that gives energy, direction, enthusiasm, power to our ministries to see people come to Christ and to grow them up into maturity in Christ so that they in turn can go and make disciples themselves. Let's talk about conception. Conception is the act of conceiving in 2 ways, mentally, which is perception, apprehension. So perceiving something is how you're viewing it, how you're looking at it. We both could sit and look at the same book, you across the table from me, and you see one side of the book and I see another. That's perception. Apprehension is understanding. Comprehension is understanding. Imagination, speculation, meditation, dreaming, deliberation, realization, consideration, a mental image. You add all of those synonyms up for the thought of conception, and you have a mental image where you are perceiving it in a certain way with an attitude and an understanding that is swirling around in your imagination. You speculate about the value of it, the workability of it, the doability of it. You're meditating on it, so you're turning it over in your head over and over again. You're dreaming about it and its value and what it could possibly do to carry out an opportunity, to fulfill an opportunity, or to solve a problem, a need, to meet a need. You deliberate about it. Okay, and so you go through it. That's what's happening when you're walking with God, walking in the Spirit, in His Word, and you're fellowshipping with other people, and you become hypersensitive to what God is trying to do in your life to communicate to you what His vision is for your ministry. Then there's the act of conceiving physically. And so conception has two ways, mentally and physically. And I give you this way just again to try and shape this thing up for you, to mature it in your thinking, and really in my thinking as well. Inception, impregnation, insemination, fertilization, pollination, procreation, implantation, breeding. These are all thoughts that we go through and think, what is God saying here? And so physically, when you want to conceive and you're marrying together a thought, an idea, a concept, an opportunity or a need, and a solution is being brought together to your fertile mind. You're being receptive to it, so it can take root. It can be planted there. And you have insemination, impregnation. You conceive of it. All right. And so as you look at this, you're propagating an idea, a concept, a mental image, an opportunity, a need, a solution. To determine as you walk with God and He's working in your thinking, this is what normally happens. This is how it happens. There's mechanics here. Indirectly, as you look, it either directly God speaking directly to you or indirectly speaking to you through other people and other ways like books and preaching and so forth, that the idea takes seed thought in your mind and is planted there, and then it begins to develop, which brings us to stage 2 of the vision discovery, and that is development. So you have an embryo that is in the womb of your mind, and now it is going to develop in its stages to the place where the gestation period is the development period. And it's going to grow to the place to the day that it's ready to be born. So there are several methods that you can use to develop a seed thought, an embryo. That which is going, when it's full grown, the idea of the dream becomes a full-blown vision. The difference between a dream and a vision is that the vision has a solution, a method, a direction to fulfill the vision. A dream may not have any idea of how it's going to be solved. It separates the two. But you usually have a dream before you have a vision. And so here are several methods that are used in this stage of developing the embryo, the idea. And the common approach, or one that probably is used the most, and Aubrey Malphurs talks about this, and he says, here are things that commonly happen for a person who is going to use a common approach, a general method of developing a vision, an idea into a vision. First off, is there is very focused prayer. You're asking for what? Well, you're asking for God's wisdom, James 1:5, and insight. Go to Proverbs, and you ask God for wisdom and insight. Then you're going to pray and think really big about what God is doing. And how will you know your vision is big enough? Well, first off, it's probably going to be bigger than your capabilities. You're looking at it thinking, there's no way this can happen unless God works. There was no way that Nehemiah could rebuild the wall by himself. He had to have the help of the king and money and permission and title, in travel, in authority to do what he did in Jerusalem. He had to have help. It was bigger than his own capabilities. God answered prayer, the focused prayer, to allow him to do it. So you're praying for wisdom and insight. You're praying for your visioneering team, that they will have God's wisdom and that they will come together and work together and communicate, cooperate, and contribute to what God is doing. And you want them to work together as a team. You pray for your congregation. You're going through all this work, and you better pray for them that they're receptive to it and that they buy it. They buy into it and take ownership of it and help in the process and get excited about it. So this focused prayer, or what Aubrey Malphurs calls envisioning prayer, it is intentional, regular, focused prayer that is focused on the visioneering process. And you want to think big, and it's bigger than your capabilities. Number two, it will challenge everyone. Number three, it will require some risk-taking. And number four, you've got to decide, is it God size or man size? If you are going to solve that problem within your own capabilities, it might not be thinking big enough. Because it won't be challenging enough. It's not God size. It's man size. You know, man can build that bridge and solve that problem. But when you need God to do it, it's a God size. Secondly, about thinking big, how can you increase the size of your vision? Well, first off is you ask God for help. You ask him for help. And so as you do this, you ask others for help. Surround yourself with intuitive people if you're a sensing person. Visionaries. You want to read their books, listen to their podcast. You want to rub shoulders with them. And what you're doing, you're asking God to do for you that which only he can do. And that is use other things outside of you, because you're a sensing person, not an intuitive person. You're going to need God to work and give it to you, because you're really sense God's will through mechanics, your five senses physically, not a sixth sense, which is almost inexplicable. It's intuitive. You just know it and see it in your mind. And neither one is best. Neither one is wrong. It's just the way God puts us together. So you can think strategically about this. So how can you increase the size of your vision? You ask God for help. You ask others for help. You think strategically, because other people can give you ideas and add to it for you to be able to go, oh, hey, that's a good idea. Let's pray through that and think through that. And then you vet the idea. So where do you see opportunities? Where do you see needs? Where do you see imperfections? You want to think big. Within the common approach, or the general method that is commonly used, regularly used by leaders, is brainstorming. So maybe you sit down with a marker board in one of your classrooms and you write down all your thoughts. So you're going to do two things. You're going to collect your thoughts and dreams, and you're going to record them. So anywhere you are, driving down the road in the car, you have a thought, you pull offside the road, you write it down. You wake up in the middle of the night, you have a thought, pull the pad out of your nightstand, click on the little flashlight and write it down, or get up and go somewhere and write it down. You're in the middle of preaching and you have a thought that comes to you while you're preaching, what in the world? And you stop and write it down. Just jot it down or tell somebody else to do it. So you are scheduling regular times to collect and record. So you collect the thoughts and record them. So you're scheduling regular times to collect and record your thoughts along with the vision statements of others. What you're doing, you're brainstorming, is you're capturing everything. And to capture it and keep it, you've got to corral it. So you're writing it down or put it in on a recorder. But you're going to capture it someplace. So write them down forces us to be disciplined and to weed out ideas. So you have this idea, and you say, that's a harebrained idea. And you write it down and get to looking at it and realize, all right, that's not going to work. It's not doable, and you vet the idea. Here's another part of this common approach to discerning and discovering God's vision is that you're going to look at the contents. And this is the fourth one in the common approach. So you're going to organize the content of what you have collected and recorded. Then you're going to sift through the options to decide what to include in your vision statement, in your vision, if you don't want to call it a statement. And here are certain things. And there is no written rule that tells you what you must put into your vision, whether it's just 3 sentences or 30 sentences, whether it's a paragraph or what you can put on a T-shirt or what you put on a page or two, whether it's 3 points or 20 points. How you go about determining what to include in there, and I had suggested this earlier, and I'll do it now. You might end up with 3 separate documents dealing with it. You may have one that can fit on a T-shirt. Might have to be front and back, but to state your vision. Then you have one that might be 3 paragraphs, 4 or 5 paragraphs, and one that might be 3 pages long. But what you're doing is you're taking the very core or summary of God's vision for your ministry and boiling it down to a statement 2 or 3, and then you're expanding that where you can use it as a teaching tool to keep your people focused and energized, enthusiastic, involved and engaged in your ministry. And you're constantly reminding them. I believe it's Rick Warren that said that Nehemiah revisited and recasted or recommunicated or communicated again the vision to the people as they worked to rebuild the wall every 26 days. Well, whether it's 26 days or 35 days or 15 days, that it is a tool that you're going to use where you are deciding what goes in there. So Aubrey Malphurs, as he writes about this, some people include the ministry's purpose or the ministry's mission or the ministry's value and strategy, its people and its location. In other words, some of the other parts of your ministry design, you can bring them into your vision statement because you're talking about the opportunity, who, and then what problem you're going to solve or what need you're going to meet. However your vision is shaped and developed by God, that you are putting that into a document that educates and motivates your people, that helps them see what the church the ministry is going to look like when it's full grown. Not as a baby, but full grown adult. And so you can include any of this in it. And this is a part of the method. The next one is to question the dream. So you go back somewhat to the definition we gave you in one of our other webinars, and you ask, is this dream, this idea, this concept that is germinating, and now it's an embryo that is developing in the womb of our mind and heart in our life, number one, is it clear? Is there clarity? Number 2, is it challenging or just ho-hum? Number 3, is it visual? Can people see it? Number 4, is it future focused? Is it focused down the road? It's taking them to another time. Number 5, is it realistic yet stretching? Is it realistic yet stretching? So it's going to stretch them in their and work them. Okay, let's talk about two ways with that, both athletic ways. Stretching yourself, so you're lifting weights and you're doing weight training, and you get to the 10th rep, and a guy with you who is spotting you says, one more, one more, one more, and you push that up. He is stretching you to go beyond what you think you can do. Running. When I was in high school, played basketball, and coach wanted to make certain that we were in shape. Well, I would run, I don't really know how many miles, along with an hour and a half to 2.5 hours of practice every day we didn't have a game. Well, in doing that preparation, he was stretching us to increase our capacity, our capabilities, to increase them, to find out how far we could go, and to build our ability to play and perform when we were worn out. And so you want to ask, it has to be a realistic dream, but is it going to stretch people beyond their normal routine, their normal ability and performance? Next, is it inspiring? Or is it going to energize them? Is it going to inspire them, motivate them? Or is it just like, yeah? And lastly, as you question the dream, is it relevant? Is it relevant? Does it apply to the people that are there? Is it that which they're interested in? Is it going to meet a need, solve a problem, or allow you to make use of an opportunity? The next part of this is to demonstrate patience. It's the 6th one in this approach, but you have to give the process enough time. I know for human beings that an embryo was in the womb for 9 months. That's the normal gestation period. But when it comes to this, our illustration kind of breaks down. Our example kind of breaks down. The metaphor breaks down. Because I don't know if it's going to take 6 weeks or 60 months. I hate to make you pass out by my saying that, but you're going to have to be patient. Can you hurry God? What if, and I believe it is, but what if the process is a part of the product of maturing us? The testing times in James 1 is God intends it for his glory and our good. He is building our endurance, and he wants us to be entire, lacking nothing, complete, mature, adulthood. So you have to be patient with God and patient with yourself and patient with the process. You can't rush it. You can't put a rush order on it and say, well, God, we got to hurry this up. We got to hurry this up. Such and such. And you start arguing with him, and he's telling you to be patient. So you think about the gestation time, but understand the time it takes to birth the vision really varies from person to person and ministry to ministry. There is another method that is used, and that is to expand the mission statement. To expand the mission statement is to restate your mission statement in vision form. This is another approach you can make to birth a vision, is to take what you already have. Remember the pyramid I showed you? And you take the mission statement and you put the right components to make it a vision statement. And so you use the 7 questions that I asked you earlier about questioning the dream. Is it clear, challenging, visual, future-focused, realistic, yet stretching, inspiring, and relevant? And you develop it and birth your vision out of your mission statement. So you visualize what your ministry will look like once the mission is completed, once it is fulfilled. In other words, it comes to maturity, and you've been doing this mission for some time. As it is developed and carried out and matured, built up, what's it going to produce? All right, so that's another way to do this. Here's another approach, another development method approach, and that's study other vision statements. Now, I want to be careful here so that you don't think, well, I'll just go adopt somebody else's vision statement like a youngin' and put it on and bring it into our house. No, it's got to fit. But you can gain a lot of ideas, and God can plant a seed thought in your mind through you studying another vision statement. So I'm not telling you to adopt it, to go borrow it and just use it wholesale. I'm telling you to study it so God might plant a seed thought in your mind, and your mind is fertile in a good soil, and it takes that seed and will germinate and produce a vision. So you collect and study other vision statements. One may grab your attention and be adaptable to your ministry, or an idea might come out of it. So you run through them, through the questions I've give you, and you go back to those 6 or 7 questions. Is it clear? So forth and so on. The next one is to dream big dreams. This is the 4th method for developing an idea that has been born in your mind, and you're wanting God to develop it into a vision. So dreaming big dreams is the thought of, and different guys have talked about this, for you to consider it. Aubrey Malphur says, go on a retreat. Others have, Brad Powell says, go on a retreat, pull aside to yourself. And as you look at this, and consider the things there, the pastor of Mecklenburg Community Church, and his name slips my mind at the moment. But as you look at this, you want to pull aside. So maybe you pull aside for a week or a short sabbatical. Maybe you do a day every week for a month. But you ask yourself, what will your ministry look like in 2 years, 4 years, 6 years, 8 years, 10 years, 12 years, 15 years, 20 years, 25 years? And you're trying to envision your ministry and what it will look like in the future. So as you see it full grown, and it's been said that intuitive leaders would be the best one to use this. But let me help you with this. When my wife and I knew that we were expecting our sons, I had a vision as to what I dreamed, an idea of what I wanted them to be like physically, mentally, socially, spiritually, professionally, what kind of men of character and characteristics, and I dreamed about it. And then I helped to rear them in a way that they could grow. Proverbs talks about it, a very debated portion of Scripture, about, raise up a child in the way that he should go, and he'll not depart from it. Well, whatever you choose, one of the 5 different interpretations, as that passage has been exegeted by different scholars and Bible students and preachers. But where do you want this to go? So as you look at your ministry, what do you think God wants for it in the future? What do you want for it? What do you envision it being? And pick all the ways: your children's ministry, your worship services, your staff, the services that you provide, the ministries that you have, the programs that you do, the world missions that you develop, your outreach and evangelism. When you look at every aspect of your church and community, what do you see it being like when it is full grown? And so we've got to think through this. So you're going to dream big dreams. So as we talk about it, you've got a very common, regular way that is used. You can expand your mission statement. You can study other vision statements, and you can pull away to retreat, and you just dream and think through, what is this in my mind's eye? What would I want it to be like as it grows up? The second stage that we're going to deal with, third stage that we're going to deal with is concerning the vision discovery, is to birth the vision. Now, how do you know when you have a vision? Well, first thing it does, it produces something: emotions, excitement, energy, enthusiasm, and exhilaration. It produces in my mind, and it will produce in your mind. And as you read others, the resources I'm putting on the website, and you go buy a handful of books and start reading about pastors that have written about this and consultants and ministers, they're going to talk about, how do you know when it is a vision, that you're going to birth the vision? How do you know? Well, it's going to produce deep down in your emotions. It's going to come flooding out of you, and you almost can't suppress it. It's going to create excitement because you're seeing what God is going to do, and you're getting to experience the emotions that belong to tomorrow, the future of your ministry as it comes to full maturity. You're getting to experience that blessing, that reward, those benefits now. And so it creates excitement and energy and enthusiasm and exhilaration that flows out of this. So secondly, how will a new vision look? Well, contextually, it's going to be contextualized. How do you know what to include in it? How do you know what to include in it? Your context will determine the content and the length of the document and the complexity of the document. Secondly, you can compare it to other vision statements. For instance, when we took our oldest son and our second son to the doctor when they were 2 years of age to have their checkup, the doctors measured their height. And from that, they projected that one would be 6'3" to 6'4", and the other one would be 6'1" to 6'3". Well, guess what? As they compared the growth of our children, our sons, to the norm, both boys ended up being 6'3" and 6'2". And the doctors were able to do that because they knew what the norm was. Well, there are some norms that have worked well for other churches that you can compare what you think is your vision, God's vision for your ministry, and compare it to others to see if where you are is what has worked. Because for a child to develop, it develops in normal ways. And when you see irregularities or something that is special, in meaning not healthy, not normal, you compare it to the normal to tell if it is online, if it's in place in its development. So as you're looking at birthing this, for instance, when your wife was, and maybe she's expecting now, but when the doctor goes and does the ultrasound and looks at the child, it's trying to determine, is this child healthy? Is it going to be a special needs child? Or is it going to come out with, 10 toes and 10 fingers and 2 eyes and 2 ears, a mouth and a nose and legs and arms and, and 2 kidneys and so forth? And so they're looking at that and they're judging it by the norm, what is regular. So as you go through this process, you ought to be thinking through it. Now, I have a question for you. You've gone through, and we've got 3 stages. The conceptual stage, where an opportunity, an idea, a concept, a seed thought, is implanted in the fertile soil of your mind and heart, and it develops until you're ready to give birth to it. And you say, here is God's vision for our ministry. So what is next? Well, I would tell you vision development is next. You got to not only discover it, birth it, but now you've got to develop it, which means what? Well, you have a baby. You think, we've got a baby, and you leave it at the hospital or bring it home and put it in its room, put it in a crib, and you leave it alone. Well, no, you've got to provide for it. It requires provision. It requires protection. You protect it from the elements. You protect it from disease. You protect it from your older children. You protect it from your animals. You protect the child. You provide for the child so you can preserve the child. Why? If this is kind of out of place for our day and time, but when my dad was coming up and my grandfather was coming up and they were reared on farms and they had children, the children were preserved because they were going to be field hands. and they were going to milk cows and hoe the rows, and they were going to plant the seeds and pull the weeds and harvest the crops and repair the buildings. And they were going to be work hands, preservation. Well, God's vision has a work to do in your life and ministry, and you've got to take care of it by providing for it, protecting it, preserving it. You've got to proclaim it to everybody. Didn't you send out notification when your baby was born and told everybody, oh, she's a beautiful girl, 19 inches long and 7 pounds, blue eyes and brown hair, and and so forth. And you might have sent out pictures of it and told people about it and said, Mom is healthy, and you're proclaiming it. And when I was pastoring, we had these big pelicans, and they were I say big pelicans, you're thinking we had an actual bird. No, it was a board cut out of plywood and painted. Stork, excuse me, not a pelican. My wife will shoot me for that, but a stork. And it was holding a baby in a towel, in a diaper, and the baby was laying in it, and it was tied in the mouth of the stork. And we'd go plant that in the yard of one of our church families. When they had a baby boy, it was blue, and a baby girl was pink. We were proclaiming to everybody, and we announced it throughout our congregation and telling them. We talked about it. Couldn't get them to shut up. What do you do next after you birth God's vision? Preparation. You start to prepare that child to crawl, roll over, crawl, eat, sleep, begin to talk. You're preparing it. You're perfecting it. You're maturing it. Why? Because God's got a will for that child, and God's got a work for that child to do, to live out its life. It has a purpose. And the same thing is true for God's vision for your ministry. You want to prepare it and perfect it, mature it, because it's got a purpose that it needs to fulfill in its life. So let God and his vision come to full maturity and carry out its work, its purpose, in your life and ministry, in your church. So that the Great Commission can be carried out, and Christ can be uplifted, and God can be honored, and you can reap the benefits of partnering with him in it. So you better develop it, and that's what we'll talk about in the next webinar. Well, I'm Marshall Shannon with your Ministry Design Coach. Ministry Design Training is providing this webinar. Our company is Ministry Design Concepts. You can reach me at this email address or either one of these phone numbers, and we trust the Lord's blessing upon you as you continue to move forward to honor God in discovering and developing and then carrying out, implementing God's vision for your ministry.